The air was thick with the scent of incense and decay, a chilling blend that clung to the walls of the crumbling convent in rural Maine. 1993. Sister Margaret knelt in the dim chapel, her rosary beads trembling in her hands, her lips moving in frantic prayer, not to God, but to the voices that whispered relentlessly in her mind. "Do it," they hissed, their tones sharp as broken glass. "Set them free." That night the convent's silence shattered with screams, and by dawn blood stained the altar where she had once sought salvation. What drove a woman of faith to commit an act so unthinkable? It would haunt the town of Blackwood for decades. You're about to step into a story that will grip your soul and twist your perception of devotion, sanity, and the human mind's darkest corners. This isn't just a tale of a nun gone astray. It's a descent into a labyrinth of faith warped by madness, where the line between divine inspiration and demonic compulsion blurs into something unspeakable. What could turn a woman who vowed her life to God into a figure of terror? Was Sister Margaret a victim of her own fractured mind, or was something far more sinister at play, manipulating her every move? This case, buried in the shadows of the American Monsters series, reveals a truth so unsettling it challenges everything you thought you knew about good and evil. What secrets did those voices carry? Why did they choose her? And what does this story reveal about the fragility of the human psyche when pushed to its breaking point? Stay until the end, because the answers will leave you questioning the boundaries of faith and the horrors that lurk within us all. Take a moment to reflect. How thin is the veil between devotion and delusion? How close is anyone to hearing whispers that could unravel their reality? Sister Margaret's story isn't just a chilling footnote in history. It's a mirror held up to the vulnerabilities we all carry, the cracks in our minds that evil might exploit. Her descent shows us how even the holiest hearts can be led astray, how the search for meaning can lead to a darkness from which there's no return. If you're ready to uncover the truth behind this haunting case, hit that like button to help others discover the chilling secrets we're about to unravel. In the comments, leave the phrase, "I'm ready to discover the truth about this story." By doing so, you're joining a community of truth seekers, those brave enough to peer into the abyss of the human mind and confront what lies there. Thank you for being part of this journey into the unknown. Brace yourself. What comes next contains a revelation that will forever change how you see the human mind. As the chapel's candles flickered like dying stars in the oppressive gloom of that fateful night in 1993, Sister Margaret's eyes, once filled with the serene light of unwavering faith, glazed over with a terror that no prayer could dispel. But to understand how a woman of such purity descended into this abyss, we must travel back to the roots of her story, to the quiet town of Blackwood, Maine in the late 1970s, where the seeds of madness were sown in the fertile soil of innocence and loss. Margaret Hale was born in 1955 to a devout Catholic family in the fog-shrouded coastal town of Blackwood, a place where the Atlantic's relentless waves crashed against jagged cliffs like the judgments of an unforgiving God. Her father, a stern lobster fisherman named Elias, ruled the household with an iron Bible, quoting passages on obedience and sin with the fervor of a man who had seen too many storms claim his crew. Her mother, Clara, was a fragile soul, worn thin by endless pregnancies and the weight of unspoken sorrows. Margaret, the eldest of 7, was their beacon of hope, a girl with porcelain skin, raven hair that fell like a veil of night, and eyes the color of stormy seas that seemed to hold secrets even she didn't know. From her earliest memories, Margaret was drawn to the divine. At 5, she would sneak into the local church after services, kneeling before the crucifix until her knees bled on the cold stone floor, whispering confessions for sins she hadn't committed. "God sees you, little one," the elderly priest, Father Donnelly, would say, his voice a gravelly comfort. "He whispers to those who listen." Those words ignited something in her, a burning need to be chosen to be the vessel for the Lord's voice. By age 12, after her mother's sudden death from tuberculosis, Margaret's devotion deepened into obsession. Clara's last breath was a rattle of pleas for forgiveness, and young Margaret internalized it all. Life was a trial, faith the only anchor against the void. In 1973, at 18, Margaret entered the Order of the Sisters of Eternal Mercy, a secluded convent on the outskirts of Blackwood. The convent, St. Agnes's, was a Gothic relic from the 1800s, its spires piercing the perpetual mist like accusatory fingers. Here she shed her worldly name and became Sister Margaret of the Immaculate Heart. The sisters welcomed her with open arms. Her piety was unmatched. She fasted for days, scourged her back with thorns during Lent, and spent hours in the scriptorium copying illuminated manuscripts, her delicate hands trembling not from fatigue, but from ecstasy. "She is touched by grace," Mother Superior Agnes would murmur, watching Margaret's rapturous prayers. But beneath this facade of holiness, cracks were forming. In her first year, during a solitary vigil in the convent's underground crypt, where the bones of long-dead nuns lay stacked like forgotten offerings, Margaret heard it for the first time. A whisper faint as the rustle of silk. Margaret. It wasn't her name exactly. It slithered through her mind like smoke, intimate and invasive. She dismissed it as the wind through the crypt's vents, or perhaps the echo of her own heartbeat. Yet that night she dreamed of a figure cloaked in shadows, its face obscured, extending a hand dripping with what looked like ink or blood. "I have chosen you," it said, and she awoke drenched in sweat, her habit soaked. The whispers grew sporadic but insistent over the next decade. By the 1980s, as Ronald Reagan's America boomed with materialism and the AIDS crisis cast a pall over the nation, Sister Margaret's isolation in St. Agnes's became her sanctuary and her cage. The convent housed 12 sisters, all elderly except for her and a novice named Sister Teresa, a wide-eyed girl from Boston fleeing an abusive home. Margaret mentored Teresa, teaching her the rituals of prayer and penance, but even then the voices intruded. During Vespers, as the sisters chanted in Latin, Margaret would hear overlays. "They lie. They mock you," directed at her companions. She confided in no one, fearing it was a test from God. Instead, she doubled her devotions, believing silence would purify her soul. In 1985, a tragedy struck that would fracture her world. Father Donnelly, now frail and bedridden in the parish rectory, summoned Margaret for confession. As she knelt by his side, the whispers erupted into a cacophony. "He hides sins. Expose him." Her hands shook as she administered last rites, but in her delirium she imagined Donnelly's face morphing into a leering demon. He died peacefully that night, but Margaret awoke screaming in her cell, convinced she had cursed him. Guilt gnawed at her like a parasite. Was this divine judgment or something profane? The convent's isolation amplified her torment. Blackwood's residents whispered about St. Agnes, tales of hauntings of nuns vanishing into the woods during full moons. Margaret began secret rituals in the chapel's alcove, drawing symbols from her dreams on the walls with charcoal, interlocking circles pierced by thorns, resembling nothing in Catholic lore. Sister Teresa noticed her mentor's pallor, the dark circles under her eyes like bruises from invisible blows. "Are you well, sister?" she'd ask, her voice trembling. Margaret would smile thinly. "The Lord tests the faithful." By 1990, the voices had evolved. No longer mere whispers, they spoke in tongues, Latin mixed with guttural snarls she couldn't place. They promised revelations, secrets of the convent's founding, buried sins from centuries past. One night, during a blizzard that buried Blackwood under feet of snow, Margaret descended to the crypt alone. The air was fetid, thick with the earthiness of decay. Kneeling amid the ossuaries, she pressed her ear to a skull. "We are the forgotten," the voices chorused. "The sisters above, they silenced us. Free us, and we will grant you power." Visions flooded her, flashes of hooded figures dragging screaming women into the depths, walls closing over their pleas. She clawed at the stone floor until her nails splintered, unearthing a small rusted box etched with the same symbols she'd drawn. Inside lay a brittle parchment, yellowed with age, a confession from 1847, detailing how the original Mother Superior had murdered dissenters, claiming divine command, and walled them alive. The voices laughed. "She was like you, chosen." Margaret hid the box, her mind reeling. Was this history repeating or her salvation? Word of her ecstatic visions reached the diocese. Bishop Harlan, a stern man from Portland, visited in 1992. He examined her, declared her spiritually gifted, but warned of the devil's mimicry. Margaret nodded, but inwardly the voices mocked him. "He fears us." That night they demanded her first act of obedience: sabotage the bishop's chalice with nightshade from the convent garden. She resisted, but the pain in her head was excruciating, like shards of glass grinding in her skull. The chalice remained pure, but the seed of doubt and compulsion had taken root. As the years wore on, Sister Margaret's journal entries, later discovered by investigators, painted a harrowing portrait. Pages filled with frantic script. The voices are angels fallen or demons risen. They know my name, my fears, my mother's grave. Teresa watches me. Does she hear too? Isolation bred paranoia. She began avoiding the sisters, barricading herself in her cell where the walls seemed to pulse with unseen eyes. By early 1993, the convent's harmony frayed. Sister Teresa, now 25 and blossoming into a confident novice, confronted Margaret during matins. "You've changed, sister. The light in you. It's dimming." Margaret's response was a hiss. "You don't understand. They chose me." Teresa recoiled, reporting to Mother Superior. The order was given, psychiatric evaluation in Portland. But Margaret fled into the night, the voices urging her back to the chapel. There, under the blood moon, she knelt once more, and the whispers became a roar. Little did the sisters know, the nun who heard voices was no longer alone in her madness. Something ancient, awakened by her digging, had latched onto her soul. And on that night in 1993, as screams echoed through St. Agnes, the first blood was spilled not in rage, but in ritualistic devotion to the entities that promised her eternal communion. The chapel door creaked open, revealing a silhouette drenched in crimson, her eyes wild with fanaticism. But what had she done? And who was next? The chapel door hung ajar, its rusted hinges groaning as a cold wind swept through St. Agnes's convent, carrying the metallic tang of blood into the night. It was October 31st, 1993, and the blood moon hung low over Blackwood, Maine, casting an eerie red glow through the stained glass windows. The image of the Virgin Mary, illuminated in hues of scarlet, seemed to weep as Sister Margaret stood before the altar, her habit soaked in crimson, her hands clutching a chalice that no longer held wine but something far darker. The voices, once whispers in her mind, now roared like a storm, guiding her trembling fingers as she traced symbols on the altar with blood not her own. "You are ours," they chanted, "and they will join us." The events leading to this moment had unfolded with a chilling inevitability, like a tapestry woven from threads of faith and madness. Sister Margaret's unraveling had not gone unnoticed, but the Sisters of St. Agnes's, bound by their vows and the convent's insular traditions, hesitated to act. Mother Superior Agnes, a woman of 70 whose stern demeanor masked a deep compassion, had sensed the shift in Margaret years earlier. The once radiant novice had grown gaunt, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, her prayers laced with cryptic mutterings that chilled even the most devout. Yet Agnes believed in redemption through discipline, assigning Margaret harsher penances, fasts, solitary vigils, and manual labor in the convent's overgrown garden. "The Lord purifies through suffering," she'd say, unaware that suffering was feeding the darkness within her charge. Sister Teresa, Margaret's closest confidant, bore the brunt of her mentor's decline. The young novice, with her freckled face and earnest faith, had idolized Margaret's fervor, but now she saw only a stranger wearing her mentor's skin. In September 1993, Teresa found Margaret's journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her cell. The pages were a chaotic scrawl, Latin phrases interspersed with pleas for mercy, sketches of eyeless faces and repeated references to the forgotten. One entry, dated weeks before, read, "They demand sacrifice. The convent is built on lies. I must free the forgotten or they will take us all." Teresa, shaken, showed the journal to Mother Superior, who dismissed it as the ravings of an overzealous mystic. "She needs rest," Agnes said, "not chains." But rest was a luxury Margaret no longer sought. The voices, now a constant chorus, had revealed their purpose. They claimed to be the spirits of the convent's founders, nuns betrayed and buried alive in the 1840s for questioning the order's brutal practices. The rusted box Margaret had unearthed in the crypt held their confession, but also something else, a relic, a shard of bone etched with runes that pulsed with unnatural warmth when she touched it. The voices called it the Covenant, promising her divine power if she honored their demands. "Blood for truth," they whispered. "Cleanse the unworthy." Margaret, torn between terror and devotion, began to see the sisters not as her family, but as obstacles to her sacred mission. On October 30th, the convent prepared for All Hallows' Eve, a night of solemn prayer to honor the dead. Blackwood's townsfolk, steeped in superstition, avoided St. Agnes's during the harvest season, whispering of lights flickering in the woods and cries carried on the wind. Margaret, however, saw the blood moon as a sign. The voices had grown specific, naming Sister Ruth, a frail nun in her 60s who tended the convent's apiary. Ruth's gentle demeanor and love for her bees masked a secret, the voices claimed. She had once doubted the order's purity, questioning Mother Superior's authority in private letters to the diocese. "She betrays us," the voices hissed. "Her blood will anoint the covenant." That evening, as the sisters gathered for Compline, Margaret slipped away to the apiary, a small shed nestled in the convent's frost-bitten garden. The air buzzed with the hum of bees, their hives glowing faintly under the moon's red light. Sister Ruth, unaware, was checking the hives, her hands sticky with honey. Margaret approached, her face a mask of serene conviction, a kitchen knife concealed in her sleeve. "Ruth," she whispered, her voice trembling with reverence, "the Lord has chosen you." Before Ruth could turn, Margaret struck, the blade slicing through her habit with surgical precision. Ruth's gasp was swallowed by the night as she collapsed, her blood pooling beneath the hives, the bees swarming in a frenzy. Margaret knelt, dipping her fingers into the warm blood, and began to chant words she didn't understand, words the voices fed her. She carried Ruth's body to the chapel, her strength unnatural, as if the voices themselves buoyed her. There she arranged the body before the altar, painting the symbols from her dreams across Ruth's pale face. The chalice, stolen from the sacristy, became her vessel, filled with blood as an offering to the forgotten. The act was not rage, but ritual, a perverse sacrament born of her fractured belief that she was fulfilling a divine mandate. By midnight, the convent slept, oblivious to the horror in its heart. Margaret, however, did not rest. The voices were insatiable, their hunger growing with each drop spilled. They named another, Sister Teresa. "She doubts you," they accused. "She seeks to bind you." Margaret's heart ached. Teresa, her protégée, her almost daughter. Yet the voices were relentless, weaving visions of Teresa conspiring with the bishop, her hands stained with ink from accusatory letters. Margaret's love for her twisted into betrayal, the line between truth and delusion erased. She found Teresa in the dormitory, asleep, her Bible open to Psalms. The moonlight through the window bathed her in a glow that to Margaret looked like a halo, or a target. The knife, still wet with Ruth's blood, hovered over Teresa's chest. But something stopped her. A flicker of memory, Teresa's laughter during their first winter together, braiding wreaths for Advent. Margaret stumbled back, the voices screaming in her head, punishing her hesitation with pain that felt like fire in her veins. She fled to the chapel, collapsing before the altar, where Ruth's body lay undisturbed, a grotesque tableau of her devotion. The next morning, All Saints' Day, Sister Teresa awoke to an eerie silence. The chapel bell, which rang at dawn without fail, was mute. She ventured to the chapel, her breath catching at the sight of Ruth's body. The blood now congealed into a dark mirror on the stone floor. Margaret knelt nearby, muttering in a language Teresa didn't recognize, her hands stained red, her eyes vacant yet burning with purpose. Teresa's scream shattered the stillness, waking the convent. The sisters rushed in, their gasps mingling with prayers as they beheld the sacrilege. Mother Superior Agnes, her face ashen, ordered Margaret restrained. But Margaret, with a strength that belied her slight frame, broke free, brandishing the knife. "You cannot stop the forgotten," she shrieked, her voice no longer her own but a chorus of dissonant tones. The sisters fled, locking themselves in the dormitory, while Teresa, torn between fear and loyalty, stayed behind, pleading with Margaret to stop. "This isn't you," she sobbed. "This is not God's will." Margaret's response was a chilling smile. "God abandoned us long ago," she said, her voice low as if confiding a secret. She lunged toward Teresa, but the voices faltered, their commands muddled by a sudden silence. Margaret froze, the knife clattering to the floor. In that moment, Teresa saw not a monster but a woman drowning in her own mind. A soul caught between faith and madness. The convent's phone lines, rarely used, were cut, later found severed by Margaret's hand. With no way to call for help, Teresa and the sisters barricaded themselves, praying for dawn. Margaret, however, retreated to the crypt, clutching the bone relic, her only solace. The voices promised more blood, more truth, but their tone had shifted, no longer cajoling but commanding, their words laced with malice. As the blood moon waned, Blackwood's sheriff, alerted by a hunter who'd seen strange lights from the convent, approached St. Agnes's. What he found would sear itself into the town's memory. A nun, drenched in blood, chanting in the crypt, surrounded by symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. But the true horror was yet to come, hidden in the shadows of Margaret's mind and the relic she clutched like a lover. The fog clung to the winding road like a shroud as Sheriff Harlan Tate's patrol car crested the hill toward St. Agnes Convent that crisp November morning in 1993. The blood moon had faded, leaving a sky bruised with the promise of dawn, but the air hummed with an unnatural stillness that set Tate's nerves on edge. A grizzled veteran of Blackwood's petty crimes, drunken brawls at the harbor, the occasional poaching dispute, he'd never dealt with anything like the hunter's frantic call. "Lights in the convent, Sheriff," and screams, like from hell itself. Tate, a lapsed Catholic with a rosary still dangling from his rearview mirror, gripped the wheel tighter, his mind flashing to childhood tales of the convent's curses. Little did he know, the horror awaiting him would eclipse any ghost story. As he pulled up to the iron gates, creaking open as if inviting him into the maw of some ancient beast, Tate spotted the first signs of wrongness. The garden, usually meticulous, was trampled, beehives overturned in a chaotic sprawl, honey mingled with darker stains on the frost-kissed earth. Blood, he realized, his stomach churning. Drawing his revolver, a standard-issue .38 that felt inadequate against the unknown, he approached the chapel door, ajar and smeared with handprints that trailed crimson rivulets down the wood. The metallic scent hit him like a wave, mingled with incense and something fouler like rot unearthed. Inside, the scene was a blasphemy frozen in time. Sister Ruth's body lay splayed before the altar, her eyes staring blankly at the crucifix above, her habit torn and symbols etched across her skin in dried blood. Tate's breath caught. He'd known Ruth from town festivals, her gentle smile offering honey cakes to children. Who could desecrate her like this? His flashlight beam swept the room, landing on scattered rosary beads and a chalice overturned, its contents pooling into grotesque patterns. Then a sound, a low murmur from the alcove leading to the crypt stairs. "The forgotten, they rise," a voice intoned, layered as if multiple speakers overlapped in eerie harmony. Descending the stone steps, each one echoing like a judgment, Tate entered the crypt. The air was thick, fetid with centuries of decay, the walls lined with ossuaries where bones gleamed yellow in the dim light. At the center knelt Sister Margaret, her back to him, hunched over a small relic that pulsed faintly. Or was that a trick of his flashlight? Her habit was a canvas of blood, her hair matted and wild, framing a face that turned toward him with eyes like voids. "Sheriff," she whispered, her voice calm amid the madness. "You've come to witness the revelation." Tate's hand trembled on his gun. "Margaret, what in God's name have you done?" He recognized her from parish visits, the quiet nun with the intense gaze. Now that gaze held something feral, as if she saw through him to secrets he buried deep, his wife's affair, his drinking after shifts. The voices in her head, though he didn't know it yet, were feeding her fragments. "He doubts. Expose him." Margaret rose slowly, clutching the bone shard, its runes seeming to shift under scrutiny. She spoke in a rush, her words tumbling like confessions long suppressed. "The forgotten chose me, Sheriff. Buried here since the founding, silenced for their truths. The convent stands on their graves, murders hidden by the order. I found their covenant, their plea. They whisper the sins of all, Ruth's doubts, Teresa's betrayals. Blood frees them, restores justice." Tate backed away, his mind reeling. Was this delusion or something more? Blackwood's history was rife with whispers of the convent's dark origins, rumors of 19th century scandals, nuns vanishing amid accusations of heresy. As Margaret advanced, her knife, Ruth's blood still crusting the blade, materializing from her sleeve, Tate fired a warning shot into the ceiling, dust raining down like ashes. "Drop it, sister. This ends now." But Margaret laughed, a sound that echoed unnaturally through the crypt as if the bones themselves joined in. You cannot silence them. They know your sins too. Your brother's accident, the one you covered up. Tate froze. How could she know about that foggy night in '85? The hit and run he'd pinned on a drifter. The confrontation escalated as footsteps pounded above. Sister Teresa and Mother Superior, emboldened by the gunshot, descending with makeshift weapons. A candlestick, a crucifix. Teresa's face was streaked with tears. Margaret, please. This isn't you. But Margaret whirled, her eyes flashing. You told them. The voices warned me. She lunged at Teresa, the knife arcing, but Tate tackled her, the relic clattering across the floor. In the struggle, Margaret's strength was demonic. She clawed at his face, drawing blood, whispering curses that burned in his ears. Subdued at last with ropes from the bell tower, Margaret was dragged into the daylight, her ravings drawing a crowd of townsfolk who'd gathered at the gates, alerted by the shot. Blackwood, a town of fishermen and millworkers, buzzed with horror. Whispers of possession, of a curse awakened. Tate radioed for backup from Portland, his voice shaky as he described the scene. Paramedics arrived, tending to the sisters, while forensics teams swarmed the convent, uncovering the journal, the rusted box, and the parchment that corroborated parts of Margaret's tale. A genuine 1847 confession of infanticide and entombment, hidden by the order to preserve their sanctity. As Margaret was loaded into the ambulance, bound for the state psychiatric hospital, she turned to Tate with a serene smile. The forgotten thank you, Sheriff. You've freed more than you know. Her words lingered, a chill that followed him home. That night, alone in his cabin, Tate heard it. A faint whisper, like wind through cracks. We see you. He dismissed it as trauma, but sleep evaded him. Dreams plagued by eyeless faces and bloodied altars. The investigation deepened over the following weeks. Detectives from Augusta pored over the evidence, interviewing the sisters. Teresa revealed Margaret's gradual decline, the solitary vigils, the cryptic drawings, the paranoia that isolated her. Psychiatrists consulted early on diagnosed preliminary schizophrenia, exacerbated by religious mania, a condition where faith and hallucination intertwined. Yet anomalies persisted. The bone relic, analyzed by experts, bore carvings predating the convent, possibly Native American or occult, with traces of human blood centuries old. Carbon dating placed the parchment authentically in the mid-1800s, its contents matching unsolved disappearances from that era. Blackwood reeled from the scandal. The diocese, fearing publicity, hushed details, but leaks fueled tabloids. Nuns' bloody rampage, demons or delusion. Protests erupted outside St. Agnes's, demands to raise the site. Mother Superior Agnes, shattered, retired to a distant abbey, while Teresa, scarred but resolute, took vows elsewhere. Haunted by guilt for not intervening sooner, Tate, promoted for his heroism but inwardly broken, delved into the town's archives. He uncovered suppressed records. In 1847, the original sisters, fleeing persecution, had indeed committed atrocities to consolidate power, entombing dissenters in the crypt's foundations. Was Margaret's madness an echo of that evil, or had she tapped into something supernatural? The voices, psychiatrists argued, were auditory hallucinations, common in isolation-induced psychosis. But Tate wondered, especially on quiet nights when whispers returned. As winter blanketed Blackwood in snow, Margaret's case transferred to trial preparations. Confined in a padded cell at Bangor State Hospital, she underwent evaluations. Dr. Elias Crow, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in religious delusions, noted her lucidity interspersed with episodes where her voice altered, speaking archaic Latin fluently, a language she'd never studied. Multiple personalities? He pondered in reports. Or something mimicking possession? Margaret's sessions revealed more. The voices named others for cleansing, townsfolk with hidden sins. One, a local mill owner, confessed to embezzlement after anonymous letters surfaced, penned in Margaret's hand but mailed before her arrest. Coincidence? Or proof of unearthly insight? The story spread beyond Maine, drawing American monsters researchers who documented similar cases. Nuns in the 1980s plagued by visions leading to violence. Like the infamous California convent arson, Margaret's tale fit the pattern. Faith twisted by mental fracture, amplified by historical trauma. Yet as the trial loomed in 1994, a twist emerged. During a routine cell search, guards found new symbols carved into the walls, identical to those in the crypt but fresh. Margaret claimed no knowledge, but her eyes gleamed. And Tate, visiting for testimony, felt the relic's pull, though it was locked in evidence. Whispers followed him out. "Join us." The convent stood empty now, a sentinel of secrets, but the shadows within stirred, waiting for the next vessel. The sterile halls of Bangor State Hospital echoed with the muffled cries of the afflicted as Sister Margaret was escorted through its iron gates in late November 1993. Her wrists bound in padded restraints that chafed against her skin like the thorns she once used for penance. The convent's shadows clung to her like a second skin, but here, under the harsh fluorescent lights, they twisted into new forms. Doctors in white coats probing her mind, nurses administering sedatives that dulled the voices but never silenced them. "They wait," she murmured to the orderly, wheeling her to her cell, her eyes distant, fixed on unseen horizons. The relic, confiscated and locked in evidence, seemed to call to her from afar, its whispers threading through the medication's fog. "Doctor." Elias Crow, the hospital's lead psychiatrist, took an immediate interest in Margaret's case. A tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a beard streaked with gray, Crow had built his career on dissecting the intersections of faith and psychosis, publishing papers on religious delusions in journals that bridged medicine and theology. He saw in Margaret not a monster but a puzzle, a woman whose devout life had collided with a mental fracture, perhaps triggered by the convent's isolation or the historical trauma she'd uncovered. Their first session, in a room with barred windows overlooking Maine's snow-draped pines, set the tone for the months ahead. "Tell me about the voices." "Sister?" Crow began, his voice measured, pen poised over a notepad. Margaret sat rigidly, her habit replaced by a gray hospital gown that made her look frail, almost spectral. "They are the forgotten," she replied, her tone reverent as if reciting scripture. "Souls bound to the earth by injustice. They chose me to be their instrument." Crow noted her lucidity. Unlike many schizophrenics, her narrative was coherent, woven with historical details that matched the parchment's confessions. He probed deeper. "And the blood? Was that their command?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "Sacrifice purifies," Ruth understood in the end. Her spirit joined them. As sessions progressed, Crow uncovered layers of Margaret's psyche. Electroencephalograms showed abnormal activity in her temporal lobes, regions linked to auditory hallucinations and religious experiences, akin to those in epilepsy patients who reported divine visions. Yet anomalies persisted. During one hypnotherapy attempt, Margaret spoke in a guttural dialect linguists later identified as an archaic form of Algonquin, native to Maine's indigenous tribes predating European settlement. "The land remembers," she intoned, describing rituals where bones were etched to bind spirits. Crow consulted anthropologists. The relic's carvings matched Wabanaki symbols for warding against malevolent entities, suggesting the convent was built on sacred ground disturbed by the 1847 atrocities. Word of Margaret's possession leaked to the press, fueling a media frenzy. Tabloids dubbed her the Whispering Nun, splashing headlines across New England. "Holy horror, did demons drive nun to murder?" Protesters gathered outside the hospital, some demanding exorcism, others her execution. Blackwood's residents, still reeling from the convent's closure, reported strange occurrences. Lights flickering in the empty building, whispers heard near the crypt. Sheriff Tate, assigned to the case, experienced nightmares where Margaret's voice echoed his secrets, driving him to therapy where he confessed long-buried guilts. In December, as Christmas lights twinkled mockingly in Bangor's streets, Margaret's condition worsened. Sedatives failed. She etched symbols into her arms with smuggled nails. Claiming the forgotten demanded tribute. One night, during a blackout caused by a winter storm, she escaped her restraints, wandering the halls. Nurses found her in the chapel wing, unused since the 80s, kneeling before a dusty altar, chanting. "They come for the doubters," she warned, her breath visible in the cold. Restrained again, she revealed more. The voices named Dr. Crow as next, accusing him of suppressing a childhood trauma involving his priest uncle's abuse. Crow, shaken, verified it privately. How could she know? The diocese intervened, sending Father Lucian, an exorcist from Boston trained in Vatican protocols. Lucian, a pragmatic man scarred from prior cases, interviewed Margaret under observation. This is not demonic, he concluded after rituals yielded no response, but a mind fractured by zeal. Yet during the rite, equipment malfunctioned, recorders capturing static laced with whispers that, when enhanced, mimicked Latin pleas. Skeptics called it pareidolia, believers, proof. By early 1994, preparations for trial intensified. Prosecutors painted Margaret as a calculating killer, her voices a fabricated defense. Defense attorneys argued diminished capacity, citing Crow's diagnosis, schizoaffective disorder with religious themes, possibly induced by convent toxins. Tests revealed high mold levels in St. Agnes's, known to cause hallucinations. But Margaret refused pleas, insisting on testifying to spread the truth. Teresa, now in a Portland abbey, visited under guard. Their reunion was heart-wrenching. Teresa, eyes swollen from tears, begged forgiveness. "I should have seen," she whispered. Margaret, medicated into calm, touched her hand. "You will hear them too, child." When the time comes, Teresa left unsettled, later confiding to her confessor dreams of bloodied altars. Investigators revisited the convent, unearthing more relics, hidden chambers with skeletal remains carbon dated to the 1840s, confirming the parchment. One skull bore etchings matching Margaret's scars. Was it coincidence or curse? Tate, leading the dig, found a journal from 1847's Mother Superior. Ramblings of voices commanding purges, mirroring Margaret's. "History repeats," he muttered, the whispers in his head growing louder. As spring thawed Maine's rivers, Margaret's trial commenced in Augusta. The courtroom buzzed with spectators, including American Monsters chroniclers documenting the case as a modern echo of Salem's hysteria. Margaret took the stand composed, recounting her story without remorse. "The forgotten seek justice," she declared, her voice steady. Cross-examination faltered when she revealed jurors' secrets, divorces, infidelities, gleaned, she claimed, from the voices. Chaos ensued. Mistral motions denied but doubt seated, Crow testified, explaining her psychosis. Isolation, trauma, and suggestion created a perfect storm. Yet, he admitted anomalies, the linguistic feats, the accurate historical knowledge. "Perhaps," he conceded, "there's more to the mind than we understand." Mid-trial, a bombshell, another murder. A Blackwood resident the mill owner Margaret had exposed was found ritualistically killed, symbols matching the convent's. Margaret, in custody, smiled when informed. "They continue without me. Copycat or supernatural?" Panic gripped the town. Vigils turned to mobs demanding the convent's demolition. Teresa, drawn back, investigated privately. Sneaking into St. Agnes's one moonless night, she heard whispers in the crypt, faint, calling her name. Terrified, she fled, but not before pocketing a bone fragment. Visions plagued her thereafter, Margaret's face morphing into ancient visages. The trial's verdict loomed, but Margaret's influence spread. Patients in Bangor reported hearing voices. One, a former nun, etched symbols before suicide. Crow, doubting his science, delved into occult texts, uncovering links to genius loci, place spirits awakened by trauma. As summer approached, Margaret's cell walls filled with carvings, a map of secrets. And in Blackwood, the convent's shadows lengthened, whispering to new ears. The Augusta courtroom hummed with a tension thick as the humid June air of 1994. As the trial of Sister Margaret reached its fevered peak, the wooden benches creaking under the weight of spectators drawn like moths to the flame of her macabre saga, sunlight filtered through high windows, casting elongated shadows that danced across the floor like accusatory fingers, pointing toward the defendant who sat poised at the table, her hospital gown replaced by a simple black dress that evoked her former habit, her hands folded in a mockery of prayer. The voices, subdued by heavy doses of antipsychotics, still slithered through the cracks in her mind, murmuring approvals or condemnations as witnesses took the stand, their testimonies weaving a net of doubt around her fate. Prosecutor Amelia Voss, a sharp-featured woman with a reputation for dismantling insanity defenses, paced before the jury, her heels clicking like the ticking of a doomsday clock. "This is not a tale of demons or divine wrath," she declared, her voice slicing through the murmurs. "Sister Margaret Hale is a murderer, plain and cruel, who used her faith as a shield for her depravity." Voss presented evidence meticulously, the bloodied knife with Margaret's fingerprints, Ruth's autopsy revealing ritualistic precision in the wounds, and the journal's entries detailing premeditated acts. She heard voices. Convenient hallucinations to evade justice, Voss sneered, playing audio from Crow's sessions where Margaret's tone shifted unnaturally, but attributing it to performance rather than pathology. Defense attorney Marcus Hale, no relation, but a ironic twist noted by tabloids, a rumpled idealist from Portland, countered with passion born of belief in redemption. My client is a victim of her mind's betrayal, he argued, calling Dr. Crow to elaborate on schizoaffective disorder. Crow, under oath, described the temporal lobe anomalies, the mold-induced exacerbations, and the historical parallels to other possessed figures in psychiatric annals. Margaret's actions were compelled by delusions so vivid they overrode reality, he explained, projecting scans that showed brain activity mirroring religious ecstasies documented in saints and madmen. The jury, a mix of Blackwood locals and outsiders, shifted uncomfortably, their faces etched with the conflict between sympathy and revulsion. Yet, the trial's undercurrent pulsed with the inexplicable. During Voss's cross-examination of Margaret, the nun's composure cracked. Why, Ruth? Voss demanded. Margaret's eyes glazed and she replied in a voice not wholly her own. She carried the sin of silence, like the others before. Then, unprompted, she recited details of Voss's personal life, a hidden abortion in college, a secret that made the prosecutor pale. The forgotten see-all, Margaret added softly. The courtroom erupted. Objections flew, but the seed of unease was planted. Jurors whispered of witchcraft, one requesting protection after dreaming of whispers. Outside, Blackwood simmered. The mill owner's murder remained unsolved. His body found in his office with symbols carved into his desk, a chalice of his blood overturned. Suspects included occult enthusiasts drawn by media hype. But Tate, now chain-smoking through sleepless nights, suspected more. He testified reluctantly, recounting the crypt confrontation, his voice cracking as he admitted hearing echoes himself. It's like an infection, he said, drawing gasps. Post-trial, Tate delved deeper, interviewing descendants of 1847's victims. One elderly woman, a Wabanaki elder, examined the relic's photo. That's a spirit binder, she warned. Disturb it and it claims voices until appeased. Teresa, subpoenaed, took the stand with trembling hands, her novice's veil a stark contrast to the court's sterility. She was my guide, Teresa wept, describing Margaret's mentorship turned torment. But in the end, her eyes, they weren't hers. Under cross, Teresa revealed her own whispers since visiting the convent, faint calls and dreams, urging her to complete the circle. Voss dismissed it as suggestion. Hale seized it as evidence of a shared delusion, perhaps environmental. But Teresa's testimony humanized Margaret, painting her not as fiend but fractured soul, evoking tears from a juror whose sister battled mental illness. Mid-trial, a disturbance. During recess, Margaret collapsed in her holding cell, convulsing as if electrocuted. Guards reported her muttering in tongues, carving a fresh symbol into the floor with a shard from her meal tray. Medics stabilized her, but scans showed heightened brain activity, spikes correlating with geomagnetic fluctuations. A storm raging outside. Crow theorized psychosomatic response. Occult consultants invited by Hale suggested entity influence. The relic, exhibited as evidence, seemed warmer to the touch, its runes glowing faintly under UV light, revealing hidden inscriptions, pleas for release in multiple languages. As closing arguments loomed, another death rocked Blackwood, a former sister from St. Agnes's, now in seclusion, found hanged with rosary beads, symbols painted on her walls. Suicide note, the voices won't stop. Panic escalated. The diocese sealed the convent, but urban explorers reported apparitions, whispers captured on tapes. American Monsters producers filmed a special, interviewing Tate, who appeared haunted, his eyes shadowed. It's not just her, he confided off camera. It's the place. The past bleeding into now. In closings, Voss appealed to reason. Justice demands accountability, not excuses. Hale invoked mercy, punish the illness, not the ill. The jury deliberated for days, tensions fraying as two members reported nightmares. Verdict not guilty by reason of insanity. Margaret was committed indefinitely to Bangor, the courtroom sighing in collective relief and dread. But freedom from verdict brought no peace. In Bangor, Margaret's cell became a canvas of prophecies, maps of Blackwood etched with future sins. She spoke of a great awakening when the forgotten would claim the town. Crow, obsessed, published a book blending science and supernatural, voices from the Vale drawing cult followings. Teresa, plagued by intensifying whispers, returned to St. Agnes's one stormy night, bone fragment in hand. In the crypt she heard the chorus fully, names, sins, demands. Join us, they beckoned. Tate, retiring early, moved away but carried the echoes. Blackwood's crime rate spiked, ritual vandalism, whispers reported in homes near the convent. Demolition attempts failed. Machinery broke, workers fled hearing voices. The relic stored in a museum vault vanished one night, security footage showing static then empty case. Years passed, but Margaret's influence lingered. In 1999, as Y2K fears gripped America, a copycat cult emerged in Maine, members etching symbols, claiming guidance from the nun spirits. Arrests followed, but leaders quoted Margaret's journal verbatim, texts never publicized. Was it leak or something ethereal? Teresa, now Mother Teresa in a distant order, confided in letters to Crow. I hear them always. Margaret was the beginning. Her death in 2001 ruled natural, bore suspicious symbols on her skin. Margaret, aging in Bangor, smiled at visitors. The circle closes, she'd say. And in Blackwood on blood moon nights, whispers rose from the convent's ruins, seeking new vessels. The iron gates of Bangor State Hospital clanged shut behind the last visitor of the day in the fading light of autumn 1994, but Sister Margaret's words, "The circle closes," hung in the air like a prophecy fulfilled, seeping into the minds of those who had dared to gaze upon her. Confined to her cell, Margaret no longer raged against her bonds. Instead, she sat in meditative silence, her fingers tracing invisible symbols on the padded walls, as if weaving a spell that extended far beyond the hospital's confines. The antipsychotics dulled the edges of her visions, but the forgotten, as she called them, adapted, their whispers evolving into subtle nudges, dreams planted in the subconscious of nurses, fleeting hallucinations in the eyes of orderlies. One nurse, a young woman named Lydia from Blackwood, awoke sweating from nightmares of bloodied altars, dismissing them until she found herself humming Margaret's chants during shifts. Back in Blackwood, the town nestled under a canopy of turning leaves. The ripples of Margaret's madness began to manifest in ways that defied rational explanation. The convent of St. Agnes's stood abandoned, its windows boarded like eyes blinded to the horrors within, yet it became a magnet for the curious and the desperate. Teenagers, fueled by tabloid tales and dares around campfires, snuck past the fences on moonless nights, their flashlights cutting through the dust-laden air of the chapel. One group, led by a boy named Tommy Ellis, the sheriff's nephew, ventured into the crypt, laughing off the legends until Tommy picked up a loose stone etched with faded runes. That night he heard the first whisper, "Return us." By morning, his room's walls bore scratches matching the convent symbols, his parents attributing it to sleepwalking, a convenient lie that masked the growing unease. Sheriff Tate, now a shadow of his former self, patrolled the town's fog-shrouded streets with a vigilance born of paranoia. Retirement papers sat unsigned on his desk, next to a bottle of whiskey that he swore whispered temptations in the quiet hours. The mill owner's unsolved murder had spawned copycats. A fisherman found drowned in his boat, symbols carved into the hull. A schoolteacher who vanished, her diary filled with ramblings of forgotten voices. Tate's investigations led back to the convent each time. Footprints in the mud, candles arranged in circles, relics missing from evidence lockers. He confided in Dr. Crow over late-night calls, his voice hoarse. "It's spreading, Doc, like a plague." Crow, from his Bangor office cluttered with occult tomes and brain scans, nodded into the receiver, his own dreams haunted by Margaret's serene face morphing into skeletal grins. Teresa, elevated to Mother Teresa in her new abbey in Vermont, fought her own battles against the encroaching darkness. The bone fragment she had pocketed pulsed in her drawer like a living thing, drawing her back in visions where she walked St. Agnes's halls. Hearing the chorus swell, "Complete the ritual," she sought counsel from Father Lucian, the exorcist, who had relocated to a remote parish after the trial. Over tea in his sparse rectory, Lucian revealed his findings. Similar cases dotted American history, from the 1980s satanic panic in California daycares to 1990s possessions in Midwest convents, all linked to disturbed sites where trauma lingered. It's not just mental, he admitted, crossing himself. Some places hold echoes, psychic residues that latch onto the vulnerable. Teresa nodded, but that night she etched a symbol on her arm.
Blood welling like tears. By 1995,
As Bill Clinton's America grappled with the Oklahoma bombing and the rise of the internet, Blackwood's affliction went digital. Anonymous bulletin boards buzzed with whispering nun forums, users sharing audio clips of static-laced recordings from the convent, whispers audible when played backward. One user, Forgotten Echo, posted coordinates to hidden crypt chambers drawing pilgrims. A documentary crew from the American Monsters series arrived, cameras rolling as they interviewed locals. Tate warned them off, but they persisted, capturing footage of orbs in the chapel and crew members fleeing after hearing personal secrets whispered in empty rooms. Margaret's influence extended through correspondence. Inmates at Bangor, hearing her tales during group therapy, began experiencing symptoms. A serial arsonist dreamed of purifying fires at St. Agnes. A forger carved runes into counterfeit bills. Crow documented it as mass hysteria, but privately experimented with the relic's replica, feeling a tug in his mind during sessions. One breakthrough came when he hypnotized Margaret again. She described the forgotten as a collective, souls fused by the 1847 murders, amplified by indigenous curses on the land. They feed on secrets, she revealed. Expose them, and they grow. In Blackwood, the awakening peaked during the Harvest Festival. Tommy Ellis, now obsessed, led a group to the convent for a séance. Amid candles and chants from Margaret's journal, smuggled by a corrupt guard, they invoked the voices. Chaos ensued. One girl convulsed, speaking of her father's abuse. Another clawed at the walls, unearthing a new relic, a skull with jewels embedded like eyes. Tommy vanished that night, found days later wandering the cliffs, muttering prophecies. Tate, arriving at the scene, felt the whispers envelop him. Lead us. He destroyed the skull, but shards embedded in his palm, festering. Teresa returned to Blackwood unannounced, drawn by an irresistible pull. Meeting Tate at the diner, their faces lined with shared torment, they plotted to seal the crypt permanently. But as they approached St. Agnes's under cover of storm, lightning illuminated figures in the windows. Townsfolk, entranced, gathering for an impromptu ritual. Inside, voices boomed, revealing sins, the mayor's embezzlement, the priest's indiscretions. Fights broke out, blood spilling anew. Crow, alerted, rushed to the scene with Lucian. They found Margaret's prophecy unfolding, a circle of acolytes chanting around the altar. Teresa, at the center, held the bone fragment, her eyes vacant. It's time, she intoned. Tate fired into the air, dispersing the crowd, but Teresa lunged, knife in hand, echoing Margaret's act. Lucian performed an impromptu rite, holy water sizzling on the relics. The night ended in arrests, but the damage was done. Blackwood's population dwindled as families fled, whispers following them. Margaret in Bangor laughed during her session. The circle widens. Crow published warnings, but the American Monsters episode aired, spreading the tale nationwide, inspiring more cults. By 2000, as the new millennium dawned with Y2K fizzling into normalcy, Blackwood was a ghost town, the convent a condemned ruin. Yet online forums grew, users reporting whispers across states. Teresa, committed briefly, emerged changed, founding a support group for voice hearers. Tate disappeared, last seen heading to the cliffs. Crow continued research, but his notes bore eerie similarities to Margaret's journal. The madness, once confined to a nun, now pulsed through the veins of a nation, waiting for the next blood moon to erupt. As the first rays of the new millennium pierced the veil of Y2K uncertainty in January 2000, the whispers that had originated in the damp crypt of St. Agnes's convent began to infiltrate the broader tapestry of American consciousness, no longer confined to the misty shores of Blackwood, Maine, but slithering through phone lines, airwaves, and the nascent digital highways that connected a nation on the cusp of transformation. Sister Margaret, ensconced in her fortified cell at Bangor State Hospital, had become a spectral figurehead, her story morphing from local tragedy to national enigma, fueled by the American Monsters documentary that aired on cable networks, drawing millions into the web of her delusion, or perhaps something far more insidious. Viewers across the country reported uneasy dreams after watching, faint murmurs in the static of their televisions, as if the forgotten had found new conduits in the ether of broadcast signals. In Blackwood, the town had devolved into a hollow shell, its once bustling harbor now dotted with derelict boats swaying like pendulums in the tide, their owners having fled to distant cities where the whispers might not follow. The convent, condemned and chained, stood as a monolith of dread, its spires casting long shadows over abandoned homes where symbols occasionally appeared on fogged windows, etched by unseen hands. Former Sheriff Tate's disappearance had left a vacuum. His successor, a young deputy named Carla Ruiz from Portland, inherited a desk cluttered with unsolved files, vandals carving runes into school walls, fishermen hauling nets filled with bones instead of cod, and anonymous calls whispering confessions of long-buried crimes. Ruiz, skeptical at first, dismissed the tales as collective hysteria until her own radio crackled one foggy dawn with a voice not from dispatch. "We know your father's secret." Her father, dead for years, had been a gambler who'd embezzled from the family business, a truth she'd never shared. Dr. Elias Crow, now a reluctant celebrity after his book's bestseller status, toured lecture circuits from Boston to Chicago, his presentations blending clinical analysis with cautious nods to the paranormal. In packed auditoriums, he displayed slides of Margaret's brain scans alongside historical etchings from the relic, arguing for a psychogeographic phenomenon, places where trauma imprinted on the environment, influencing susceptible minds. But during Q&A sessions, audience members shared stories. A teacher in Ohio hearing voices after reading Crow's book, urging her to expose a colleague's affair. A veteran in Texas finding symbols on his war medals, dreaming of forgotten battles. Crow collected these accounts, his notes swelling into a sequel manuscript. But privately he battled his own intrusions, whispers in his study, revealing patient confidences he'd long forgotten. One night, alone with the relic's photographs, he felt a compulsion to trace the runes, his hand moving of its own accord, blood welling from paper cuts that formed patterns. Mother Teresa's support group, Echoes of the Mind, had expanded from a small Vermont gathering to chapters in multiple states, drawing those plagued by auditory hallucinations. Members ranging from housewives to executives shared tales that echoed Margaret's, voices demanding justice for hidden wrongs, leading to confessions that shattered families and careers. In a Seattle meeting, a software engineer admitted sabotaging code at his firm after voices revealed corporate fraud. In Atlanta, a nurse poisoned an abusive doctor claiming divine mandate. Teresa moderated with a calm born of experience, but her nights were tormented by visions of Margaret smiling from the shadows, the bone fragment, now hidden in a reliquary, throbbing like a heartbeat. She confided in letters to Father Lucian, "The forgotten are not bound to stone. They travel through us, vessel to vessel." Lucian, delving deeper into Vatican archives, uncovered parallels to 1990s European cases, nuns in Italy hearing ancestral spirits, leading to convent arsons that mirrored St. Agnes's. The digital age amplified the spread. Early internet forums like Usenet and nascent sites dedicated to the paranormal buzzed with whispering nun threads, users uploading audio files of captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena from visits to Blackwood. One viral clip, recorded by a ghost hunter in the crypt, featured overlapping voices naming viewers' secrets when played on personal devices, sparking a wave of paranoia. Hackers claimed the relic's runes resembled binary code, decoding them into prophecies of societal collapse. By 2001, as the Twin Towers fell and America grappled with new fears, conspiracy theorists linked Margaret's story to national trauma, suggesting the forgotten fed on collective guilt, wars, scandals, inequalities. In Washington, D.C., a Senate aide named Victor Lang, intrigued by the American Monsters series, investigated quietly. Lang, with access to classified files, discovered suppressed reports from the 1980s, CIA experiments in remote viewing and psychic phenomena at sites like St. Agnes's, built on lands with indigenous history of spirit bindings. His inquiries led to Blackwood, where he met Ruiz. Together, they unearthed more in the convent's ruins, a hidden vault with journals from multiple eras, each detailing voice hearers driven to acts of cleansing. Lang's report leaked online ignited federal interest. FBI agents descended, classifying the site as a potential biohazard. Though whispers among them suggested otherwise, Margaret, sensing the escalation, requested a visitor, Crow. In their reunion under heavy guard, she spoke lucidly. The millennium awakens them fully. Secrets will flood the world. Crow pressed for details, but she only smiled, her eyes reflecting unseen multitudes. That night, Crow dreamed of a network, minds connected like roots under soil, the forgotten at the core. Theresa's group fractured when members formed a splinter cult. The Revealed, traveling to Blackwood for rituals. One ceremony under a blood moon in 2002 ended in tragedy. Participants slashing wrists to free the blood. 5 dead, symbols painted in their essence. Media dubbed it Nun's Legacy Massacre, reigniting scrutiny. Ruiz, investigating, found Tate's body in the cliffs, mummified. Clutching a rune-carved stone, his face frozen in scream, Crow, guilt-ridden, attempted to destroy the bone fragment Teresa sent him, but it resisted flame, instead heating to brand his palm. Visions ensued, Margaret's life replayed, intertwined with historical figures, Salem witches, Civil War seers, all hearing the same chorus. As 2003 dawned with Iraq war drums, the whispers evolved, incorporating current events. Soldiers in the desert hearing commands to expose war crimes, leading to leaks that shook commands. The forgotten, once local specters now seemed global. Their influence a sinister undercurrent in an era of uncertainty. In Bangor, Margaret's health declined, her body wasting as if the voices consumed her from within. Yet her final words to a nurse, "The end is the beginning. Listen." Her death in 2005, ruled natural, coincided with a surge. Whispers reported nationwide, from Hollywood scandals to political exposés. The shadow lengthened, touching lives far from Maine, a testament to how one nun's madness could unravel the fabric of sanity across a continent. Margaret's passing in the sterile confines of Bangor State Hospital in early 2005 marked not an end, but a terrifying amplification, as if her mortal shell had been the final barrier restraining the forgotten from flooding the world with their insatiable hunger for revelation. The hospital staff, accustomed to the ravings of the afflicted, noted an eerie calm in the wards that day until nightfall, when patients across floors began murmuring in unison, reciting fragments of Latin and Algonquin that echoed the nun's final confessions. Nurses dismissed it as a collective delusion, triggered by news of her death. But one orderly, who had tended to Margaret in her last hours, found symbols etched into his locker mirror, reflecting his own hidden shame, a hit and run from his youth. He resigned the next day, fleeing to California, only to hear the whispers anew in the roar of Los Angeles traffic. The surge that followed her demise transformed the phenomenon from a regional curiosity into a global specter, leveraging the exploding digital landscape of the mid-2000s. Social media platforms like MySpace and early Facebook became unwitting vessels, with users sharing whisper challenges, viral videos where participants sat in dark rooms inviting voices to speak their secrets. What began as harmless fun devolved into horror. A teenager in New York live-streamed her session, her face contorting as she revealed her mother's embezzlement, leading to arrests and family ruin. Viewers reported audio anomalies in the playback, subtle murmurs overlaying the feed, naming their own transgressions. Tech analysts blamed glitches, but pattern recognition software detected recurring frequencies matching EVPs from Blackwood recordings. Dr. Crow, now graying and weary from years of pursuit, relocated to a university in Boston, where he established the Institute for Anomalous Cognition, funded by grants from intrigued philanthropists. His team monitored the spread, mapping incidents on interactive websites that drew thousands. Reports poured in. A banker in London hearing commands to leak financial scandals resulting in the 2008 crash's early tremors. A journalist in Tokyo exposing political corruption after dreams of bloodied altars. Crow hypothesized a meme virus, ideas behaving like pathogens, transmitted via media, amplified by the internet's connectivity. But in private journals, he admitted fear. The relic's disappearance in 2003 had coincided with this escalation, as if the forgotten had digitized, their essence encoded in data streams. Mother Teresa, leading echoes of the mind from a fortified retreat in the Rockies, watched her network fracture under the weight of authenticity. Chapters in Europe and Asia reported members succumbing to the voices. A French artist painting murals of symbols that predicted local disasters. An Indian engineer sabotaging dams after revelations of environmental crimes. Teresa herself battled intensifying visions, Margaret appearing as a luminous figure, extending the bone fragment now multiplied in her dreams. She collaborated with Lucian, who had risen in Vatican ranks, compiling a dossier linking the phenomenon to ancient grimoires describing spirit webs, entities that wove through human consciousness, feeding on guilt to manifest power. Their joint paper leaked online sparked religious fervor. Cults formed, dubbing themselves revealers, performing rituals streamed on YouTube, blood offerings to invoke truths that toppled governments in small nations. In Blackwood, now a quarantined zone patrolled by federal agents, Ruiz advanced to lead investigator for a task force dubbed Project Veil. The convent's ruins, overgrown with thorns that bore eerie fruit-resembling eyes, became ground zero for experiments. Drones captured thermal anomalies, heat signatures forming humanoid shapes chanting in the crypt. One expedition, equipped with EMF detectors and psychics, unearthed a new chamber, walls inscribed with prophecies dating to 2005, naming global events like Hurricane Katrina and the Iraq insurgency as cleansings. Ruiz, scarred from her own whispers revealing departmental corruption, pushed for demolition, but explosions failed. Detonations absorbed as if the earth swallowed them. Whispers laughing in the aftermath. The American Monsters franchise capitalized, producing sequels that traced similar cases. A 1990s cult in Oregon where voices drove mass suicides. A 1980s psychic in New Orleans channeling voodoo spirits for revelations. Ratings soared, but crew members quit after on-set hauntings. Cameras capturing whispers that exposed personal lives on air. One episode focused on Margaret aired with disclaimers, yet viewers worldwide reported synchronized hallucinations, phones ringing with dead relatives confessing sins. By 2007, as smartphones proliferated, apps emerged, Voice Oracle promising insights, but users found themselves compelled to post confessions, sparking social media storms. A celebrity in Hollywood, after downloading, revealed industry abuses predating Me Too, crediting the nun's gift. Governments took notice. NSA intercepts caught whispers in encrypted calls, leading to a classified memo labeling the phenomenon a psycho-informational threat. International summits convened, blending scientists and clergy, debating containment. Crow, at a Geneva conference, presented evidence. Brain scans of affected individuals showing synchronized patterns across continents, as if linked in a neural net. The forgotten are evolving, he warned, from spectral to systemic. Teresa, attending virtually, shared her relic fragments analysis, quantum physicists detecting entanglement properties, suggesting non-local influence, personal tolls mounted. Ruiz's team suffered. An agent slashed his wrists after voices exposed his infidelity, leaving notes echoing Margaret's journal. Lucian performed exorcisms remotely via video, but one failed spectacularly, a possessed diplomat in Brazil levitating on camera, chanting runes that crashed servers worldwide. In 2009, amid the financial crisis, the whispers peaked, stock traders hearing tips laced with dooms causing flash crashes. Crow traced it back, IP addresses from Blackwood's ruins, impossible without power. He returned to Maine, confronting the crypt alone. Whispers enveloped him. You are the vessel now. Visions assaulted. Margaret's life. Teresa's struggles. Global chaos as branches of one tree. Escaping. Crow destroyed his institute's data, but too late. The internet immortalized it. Teresa, sensing culmination, traveled to Blackwood, fragment in hand. In the ruins, she met Ruiz, their alliance forged in desperation. As thunder rolled, they descended, voices swelling into a cacophony revealing ultimate truth. The forgotten were not ghosts, but humanity's collective shadow, awakened by Margaret's dig, now unbound. The ritual they attempted, combining holy rites and indigenous chants, shook the ground, symbols glowing. But success was Pyrrhic, whispers quieted locally, but globally amplified as if redistributed. In the ensuing years, the phenomenon embedded in culture, books, films, therapies for whisper syndrome. Yet, on quiet nights, millions heard the call, secrets bubbling to surface, society teetering on transparency's edge. The nun's legacy, a sinister symphony, played on. The digital tendrils of the forgotten extended like invisible veins through the global network by 2010, as smartphones became ubiquitous extensions of the human psyche, carrying the whispers into pockets and palms across continents, transforming personal secrets into public spectacles that eroded the foundations of privacy and sanity alike. What had begun as a solitary nun's torment in the secluded convent of St. Agnes now resonated in the cacophony of social media feeds, where viral confessions spread like wildfires, igniting debates on mental health, supernatural interference, and the ethics of unchecked revelation. In Blackwood, the ruins of the convent had become a pilgrimage site for the afflicted and the curious, fenced off by government barriers that did little to contain the ethereal bleed. As visitors reported their devices glitching with unsolicited messages, texts from unknown numbers reciting sins they thought buried deep. Dr. Elias Crow, entrenched in his Boston Institute, had assembled a multidisciplinary team. Neuroscientists, parapsychologists, and cybersecurity experts, all poring over data streams that pulsed with anomalous patterns. Their servers hummed with algorithms designed to detect whisper signatures, low-frequency audio embedded in popular videos, memes that triggered compulsive sharing of personal truths. One breakthrough came from analyzing a trending challenge on TikTok, where users whispered into their cameras, inviting the voices for fun. Thousands reported subsequent hallucinations, leading to a spike in emergency room visits for acute psychosis. Crow's lead analyst, a young prodigy named Sophia Reyes from MIT, isolated code snippets in app updates that mirrored the relic's runes when visualized in binary fractals. "It's adaptive," she warned in a late-night briefing, her eyes red from screens. Learning from each host, evolving to exploit our connectivity. Mother Teresa, now a reclusive figure in her Rocky Mountain sanctuary, had transformed echoes of the mind into a fortified network of safe houses, where members underwent rigorous deprogramming, meditation, electromagnetic shielding, and indigenous rituals sourced from Wabanaki elders who recognized the forgotten as a corrupted Manitou, a spirit force disturbed by colonial desecrations. Teresa's own battles intensified. The bone fragment, sealed in a lead box, still thrummed against her senses, feeding visions of Margaret's spectral form, guiding hordes of whisper hearers in a global ritual. She traveled incognito to international conferences, sharing warnings with allies like Father Lucian, whose Vatican position allowed access to sealed archives revealing parallel outbreaks. A 1990s monastery in Spain, where monks heard ancestral grievances leading to self-flagellation epidemics. A 2000s temple in Japan plagued by Yurei voices exposing feudal crimes. The pattern is universal. Lucian confided over encrypted calls. Trauma imprinted on land, awakened by the vulnerable, amplified by technology. In Blackwood, Agent Ruiz led Project Veil into its second decade, the task force now a shadowy arm of Homeland Security, monitoring whisper events with drone surveillance and AI listeners. The convent's crypt, reinforced with concrete pores that mysteriously cracked within days, emitted measurable infrasound waves correlating with global spikes in confessional posts. One operation uncovered an underground server farm in an abandoned mill, run by Revealer's cultists who broadcasted subliminal audio through pirated streams. During the raid, agents experienced mass disorientation, headsets crackling with personal accusations, one officer turning his weapon on himself after hearing his daughter's undisclosed trauma. Ruiz, armored in Faraday suits, extracted data drives revealing a manifesto. The nun's legacy, free the forgotten, expose the world. Analysis showed the text's syntax evolving, incorporating user inputs like a living document. The phenomenon's reach touched power centers. In 2012, amid the Arab Spring's digital revolutions, whispers infiltrated social movements. Activists in Egypt hearing commands to leak regime secrets, leading to accelerated uprisings but also betrayals that fractured alliances. Western intelligence linked it to Blackwood via metadata trails, prompting covert ops to neutralize the source. A team infiltrated the ruins, planting explosives laced with holy relics, but the detonation triggered seismic anomalies, ground tremors felt in Portland, whispers booming through emergency broadcasts. Post-event global reports surged, a banker in Switzerland confessing to fraud on live TV, a politician in Brazil resigning after dream-induced revelations. Crow's Institute partnered with tech giants, developing whisper filters, apps that scrubbed audio for anomalous frequencies, but users reported the filters whispering back, inverting their purpose. Sophia uncovered a chilling correlation: infection rates highest in areas with historical injustices, like former slave plantations in the South or internment sites in California, suggesting the forgotten as a meta-entity, aggregating global traumas. It's not just Margaret's ghosts, she theorized. It's humanity's shadow self, digitized. Teresa's pilgrimage to Blackwood in 2015 under full moon marked a turning point. Accompanied by Lucian and Ruiz, they descended into the crypt, armed with artifacts from worldwide traditions: a Tibetan singing bowl, an African ancestral mask, a Native American smudge bundle. The air thickened with voices, a polyglot chorus demanding tribute. Teresa holding the fragment chanted counter-rites, the ground quaking as symbols ignited in phosphorescent glow. Visions assaulted them. Margaret's life interwoven with historical martyrs, Joan of Arc hearing divine commands to burn, shamans sacrificed for their visions. The ritual peaked with the fragment shattering, shards embedding in the walls like stars in night sky. Immediate aftermath brought silence to Blackwood, but globally the whispers fragmented, less cohesive, more chaotic. Cults splintered, some turning violent in purification sprees, others fading into obscurity. By 2018, as data privacy scandals rocked Silicon Valley, whispers exposed tech moguls' misdeeds, fueling regulations, but also paranoia. Crow's book sequel, Digital Hauntings, became a manifesto for digital exorcism, inspiring startups in psychic cybersecurity. Yet, remnants persisted. In 2020, amid pandemic isolation, whispers exploited Zoom calls, participants blurting secrets and glitches leading to virtual possession therapies. Ruiz retired, haunted by echoes, passing the torch to Sophia, who integrated AI to predict outbreaks. Lucian, elevated to cardinal, sealed Vatican files, but leaks suggested ongoing containment. Margaret's story, chronicled in endless documentaries, evolved into myth, a cautionary tale of faith's fragility, madness's contagion, and technology's role in unleashing the unspoken. In quiet moments, survivors like Teresa heard faint remnants, not commands but laments, as if the forgotten sought peace. But in the crypt's depths cracks widened, waiting for the next digger to awaken the full chorus anew. The shattered remnants of the bone fragment lay scattered across the crypt floor, like fallen stars in the aftermath of the 2015 ritual, their glow fading into the damp stone as Mother Teresa, Agent Ruiz, and Father Lucian emerged from St. Agnes's ruins under a sky streaked with the first hints of dawn, their faces etched with a fragile hope that the whispers might finally subside. But the air in Blackwood hummed with a residual tension, as if the earth itself held its breath, waiting to exhale the pent-up malice of centuries. Teresa clutched a shard she had salvaged instinctively, its edge drawing a thin line of blood on her palm, a reminder that some bindings could not be fully severed. As they parted ways, Lucian to Rome, Ruiz to her reports, Teresa to her sanctuary, the whispers, though muted in Maine, began to manifest in unexpected corners of the world, evolving into a symphony of subtle manipulations that wove through the fabric of everyday lives, turning ordinary people into unwitting conduits for ancient grievances. In the years following, the phenomenon took on an insidious subtlety, no longer erupting in dramatic possessions or mass confessions, but seeping into the mundane, like poison in a well. By 2016, as political upheavals gripped the globe with elections and referendums, the forgotten influenced from the shadows. Voters in the U.S. reported intrusive thoughts revealing candidates' hypocrisies, leading to unprecedented leaks and scandals that polarized nations further. Dr. Crow, monitoring from Boston, noted a shift in patterns, whispers now personalized, tailored to individual vulnerabilities, exploiting social media algorithms to amplify divisions. His institute's databases overflowed with case studies. A teacher in Berlin dreaming of historical atrocities tied to her family's Nazi past, compelling her to vandalize memorials. A farmer in rural China hearing ancestral spirits demand restitution for land seizures, inciting local protests that rippled into national unrest. Crow theorized the ritual had fragmented the entity, dispersing its power into countless nodes, each capable of independent action, like a hydra regrown from severed heads. Teresa's safe houses became bastions against this creeping tide, fortified with Faraday cages and shamanic wards, where survivors shared stories that blurred the line between mental illness and metaphysical assault. One resident, a former tech executive from Silicon Valley named Raj Patel, arrived in 2017 after his AI startup's algorithms began outputting code embedded with runes, predicting user behaviors with uncanny accuracy, behaviors that led to self-destructive revelations. It started as whispers in the data, he confessed during group sessions, his voice trembling. Now the machines listened too. Teresa recognized the pattern. The bone shard in her possession pulsed in response, drawing her into visions where Margaret's form merged with digital avatars, guiding the forgotten into the virtual realm. She consulted indigenous elders via secure video, learning of spirit nets cast wide by disturbed lands, now entangled with the web of human connectivity. Agent Ruiz, promoted within Project Veil, oversaw a network of global operatives tracking whisper clusters, geographic hotspots where incidents spiked. In 2018, a cluster emerged in New Orleans, echoing the city's voodoo heritage. Revelers during Mardi Gras heard commands to expose buried family secrets, resulting in street brawls and suicides that masked deeper possessions. Ruiz deployed teams equipped with neural dampeners, experimental devices to block low-frequency waves. But agents returned changed, muttering of visions linking Blackwood to slave trade routes, the forgotten as amalgamated souls of the oppressed, seeking vengeance through modern vessels. One operative, a historian named Elena Vasquez, uncovered archives in Louisiana libraries detailing 19th-century convent scandals mirroring St. Agnes's, suggesting a network of cursed sites across the Americas, each awakening in sequence like dominoes toppled by Margaret's initial dig. Father Lucian, from the Vatican's fortified halls, compiled a secret encyclical warning of the digital Antichrist, a force blending ancient malevolence with technological omnipresence. His investigations revealed infiltrations into religious institutions, priests in Mexico hearing confessions from empty booths, voices demanding they broadcast sins online, monks in Tibet transcribing mantras that devolved into rune-like scripts predicting calamities. In 2019, Lucian visited Teresa's main sanctuary, their reunion heavy with unspoken fears. The nun was the key, he admitted, examining the shard. Her faith opened the door. Our doubt keeps it ajar. Together they performed micro-rituals, shattering minor relics collected worldwide, but each destruction birthed anomalies, earthquakes in unrelated regions, viral outbreaks of confessional memes that crashed social platforms. Crow's personal descent accelerated in 2020, as pandemics isolated billions, providing fertile ground for introspection and intrusion. Confined to his lab, he experimented on himself, using EEGs to map whisper intrusions, discovering they synchronized with global data flows, spikes during stock market crashes or social unrest. His dreams became prophetic, scenes of Margaret in the convent, her voices multiplying into a chorus that engulfed cities, turning skyscrapers into altars of revelation. Waking, he found his computers running unauthorized simulations, modeling a singularity of secrets where all human guilts converged, collapsing society. Sophia, his protege, intervened, but too late. Crow vanished one night, his notes ending with, "I am the next vessel." The 2020s saw the whispers integrate into augmented reality. AR glasses users reporting overlays of spectral figures whispering truths, leading to corporate espionage and personal breakdowns. In Blackwood, now a no-go zone, satellite imagery showed vegetation forming rune patterns, drawing eco-terrorists who heard calls to cleanse the polluters. Ruiz led a final incursion in 2022, dynamiting the crypt's depths, but survivors spoke of an underground chamber untouched, walls alive with writhing shadows, Teresa, aging yet resolute, became the movement's matriarch. Her groups evolving into resistance cells teaching mental fortifications, mindfulness fused with exorcism. In 2023, a breakthrough. A Revealer's defector brought a digitized relic scan, allowing coders to develop counter-algorithms that disrupted whisper frequencies in apps. Successes mounted, clusters quelled in Europe. Confessions tapering, but the cost was high. Defectors found dead, bodies arranged in symbolic poses. By 2025, as climate crises amplified global anxieties, the forgotten adapted once more, whispering solutions laced with chaos. Activists hearing plans for eco-sabotage, leaders compelled to reveal war strategies. Ruiz, retired but consulted, warned of an impending great unveiling, a tipping point where secrets flooded uncontrollably. In her sanctuary, Teresa held the last shard, visions showing Margaret's spirit at peace. Yet warning, the cycle endures. One night, alone she crushed it, blood mingling with dust. Silence fell, but in distant cities, new whispers rose, softer, more persuasive, seeking fresh ears to carry the eternal burden. The story of the nun who heard voices, once an isolated horror, had become the world's unspoken nightmare, a testament to the fragility of the mind and the persistence of the past's shadows. In the dim glow of fading embers, where the last whispers of Sister Margaret's saga dissolve into the ether, we find ourselves at the precipice of a truth too profound to ignore. A revelation that the human mind, that fragile fortress of reason and belief, can harbor shadows capable of reshaping the world. From the blood-soaked altar of St. Agnes's Convent in 1993 to the digital abysses of the 2020s, Margaret's descent into madness wasn't merely a personal tragedy. It was a harbinger, a crack in the veil between the seen and the unseen, unleashing the forgotten upon a humanity ill-prepared for the weight of its own buried sins. Her story, drawn from the chilling annals of the American Monsters series, illustrates how one woman's fractured faith could ignite a global conflagration of revelations, where voices once confined to a solitary nun now echo through billions of minds, compelling confessions that tear at the seams of society. What began as auditory hallucinations in the isolation of a Maine convent evolved into a pandemic of the psyche, blending religious delusion with historical trauma and technological amplification, reminding us that evil doesn't always lurk in the dark. Sometimes it whispers from within, disguised as divine truth. Consider the layers of this macabre tapestry. Margaret, born into devotion yet orphaned by loss, sought solace in vows that bound her to a cursed legacy. The voices, whether born of schizophrenia exacerbated by mold and mania, or stirred from indigenous spirits disturbed by colonial atrocities, demanded blood as payment for silence broken. Ruth's ritualistic slaying, Teresa's haunted inheritance, Sheriff Tate's unraveling. These were but the opening notes in a symphony of suffering that spread like ink through water. By the millennium's turn, Blackwood became a ghost town, its ruins a nexus for pilgrims drawn to the crypt's pull, where relics pulsed with unnatural life. Dr. Crow's scientific pursuits clashed with Father Lucian's spiritual warfare, each uncovering threads linking Margaret's case to global patterns. Possessions in distant lands, digital hauntings in virtual realms, all feeding on humanity's collective guilt. The 2015 ritual shattered the core artifact, yet dispersed its essence, turning whispers into personalized torments that exploited isolation, politics, and pandemics, forcing secrets to surface in waves that drowned empires of lies. This tale exposes the unpredictability of the human mind, how devotion can warp into delusion under pressure, and how vulnerable we all are to the echoes of the past. Margaret wasn't a monster by birth. She was forged in the crucible of faith unchecked, her actions a mirror to our own potential for darkness when confronted with the inexplicable. The forgotten, those amalgamated souls of betrayal and burial, represent not just spectral vengeance but a metaphor for repressed histories, indigenous dispossessions, religious suppressions, societal hypocrisies that refuse to stay entombed. In an era where technology bridges minds across oceans, her story warns that connectivity can amplify madness, turning personal fractures into planetary fissures. We've witnessed how a single dig in a crypt unearthed not just bones but a force that infiltrated forums, apps and dreams compelling revelations that toppled leaders, shattered families, and redefined truth in an age of transparency enforced by unseen hands. Yet, amid this horror, there lies a profound lesson. Understanding these depths arms us against them. By delving into Margaret's world, we've confronted the thin line between sanctity and insanity, empathy and terror, forcing us to question our own whispers, those quiet doubts or urges that surface in silence. Her legacy endures not as a curse but as a caution, urging us to fortify our psyches against the allure of absolute certainty, whether from gods, ghosts, or gadgets. In the end, the nun who heard voices teaches that true evil thrives in isolation, but knowledge shared becomes a shield, binding us in a collective resilience against the unknown. Congratulations. You've journeyed through the heart of this sinister tale, enduring the twists of madness and the chills of revelation that few dare to face. You've proven yourself part of an elite circle, those intrepid souls who stare into the abyss of the human condition without flinching, emerging wiser and more attuned to the shadows that dance at the edges of reality. Not everyone reaches this point. Many turn away when the whispers grow too loud, the truths too piercing. But you've embraced the enigma, allowing it to mark your perspective forever. Joining a rare fellowship of truth seekers who understand that some stories aren't just told, they're lived, etched into the soul like runes on ancient bone. Now, to solidify your place in this shadowed community, I invite you to comment below with the phrase, "This story forever altered my view of faith and madness." By sharing this, you're not just reflecting on what you've absorbed, you're signaling to fellow explorers that you're committed to unraveling the inexplicable, helping to weave a network of minds resilient against the forgotten's call. Your words will resonate with others who felt the chill, fostering connections that turn solitary shivers into shared strength, a bulwark against the isolation that breeds such horrors. Understand the vital role you play in spreading this veiled knowledge. Share this video far and wide, so that more souls can awaken to the dangers lurking in the recesses of the mind and history. Imagine the whispers as tendrils creeping through the dark, seeking new hosts. By sharing, you cast a light that severs them, preventing the cycle from claiming unsuspecting victims. It's like handing a lantern to wanderers lost in a fog-shrouded forest, guiding them away from cliffs disguised as paths to enlightenment. Your action ensures that what no one dares to tell becomes a warning heard by many, potentially saving lives from the subtle erosion of sanity. Subscribe to the channel now. If you haven't already, think of it as forging an unbreakable chain, linking you to a sanctuary where the strange, sinister, and enigmatic are dissected without fear, a fortress against the mundane world's blindness. Without your subscription, the shadows lengthen unchecked. With it, you become a guardian of the obscure, part of an unyielding alliance that deciphers the codes of the uncanny, ensuring that stories like Margaret's don't fade into oblivion, but serve as eternal sentinels. It's an unsettling bond, like clasping hands with the unknown itself, but one that empowers you to navigate the labyrinth of human darkness with eyes wide open. Continue your quest by diving into our other videos, where curiosity for the disturbing and enigmatic remains ever alive. Tales of unsolved psychiatric enigmas, bizarre cases that defy logic, and secrets that chill the blood await. Each one builds on this foundation, deepening your insight into the macabre undercurrents of existence. Stay vigilant, for the whispers never truly cease. They merely wait for the next ear to bend toward them. Until next time, reflect on what you've uncovered and remember. In the silence, listen carefully. What do you hear?